All right, we're going to be finishing. We're going to be finishing the tour in. We're going to be finishing the tour in Tafkuf Gimel, and then we're going. I mean the base Yosef, and then we're going to jump to Tafkuf Gimel, which is the main halachas of Eruv Tavshilin. These halachas are basically hilchas Yom Tov, which inform us about what problems we have and what problems we need to solve with the Eruv Tavshilin. Tafkuf Gimel. And then we will jump into Tafkuf Chav Zayin. So we just have a couple of things to finish off on Tafkuf Gimel. We left off last time that there's no you're not allowed to be marim after you ate. Harama is usher. You finished all your meal, and then you say, you know what, maybe I'll get guests, and you know you won't get guests. So that's called harama, and it's usher. And we met, and it's even usher that even if you're going to eat from from what you're cooking now, a little bit of each, it's not good, as opposed to certain kinds of aroma, which is not cooking, where we say that if you're going to use it, it may be okay. And you can be marim by saying, well, I need this meat, I need that meat, because the salting, if you remember, the aroma was salting the meat. That's not as big of an issue on Yontif as cooking. And then we got to the issue of what about before I ate? I didn't eat my meal yet. Now, I know that I only need one pot. Remember, I'm allowed to put 5 pieces of meat in the pot. That way everybody agrees because it improves the meat. According to Rashi, you got to do it all at once. According to other Rishonim, you can even do it afterwards, but it's got to be while it's cooking. But what about cooking 3 pots of meat, knowing I'm only going to use 1 pot of meat before I ate my meal? So we saw there at the end of that section in the Beis Yosef, we saw there at the in that section that starts with Perek Beis, we saw that before the meal, if you can be marim by eating a little bit from each pot, but that's only before the meal. Since you haven't eaten yet, and you're saying, well, I'm going to cook each pot and eat a little bit, so that's less of a harama than after you ate already. Okay, remember that's where we left off last time. Okay, so now we want to jump to ubetashbeitz. Okay, we're going to do the tashbeitz kosav shemaram hitir. Everybody see where we are? All right, it's one of the last Beis Yosefs in this siman.
I'm sorry, one more time. Which siman again?
Tafkuf Gimel, and we're towards the very end of the Beis Yosef. It's like the third to the last Beis Yosef, or of Aleph Ubetashbeitz. Okay, we're going to also remember that we were more machmir on marim than we were on mezin. You remember that. That's also going to come up. Everybody see where we are, or not yet? It's one of the last sections in the Beis Yosef in Tafkuf Gimel. It starts with Ubetashbeitz. If you've got the new tour, four lines into the wide lines. Josh, you got it? Okay. David, I don't see you, but I'm assuming I didn't hear from you, so I hope you got it. Unless you're not following inside. Okay. Here we go. Ubetashbeitz kosuv shamaharal maram hichmir isha she'afta mi yom tov rishon shel Rosh Hashanah lechavero miditzanan amivashel b'Shabbos b'shogeg yeachel. So it's only that if you did it b'shogeg, you can eat. The Rambam kosav perak aleph hamavashel ofe biyom tov kidei lechol bo bayom o shezimin orchid v'lo bo. So he cooked to eat today, or he invited guests that didn't show up. The nishar hatav shil vehapat hareza muter la'ochlo bein b'chol bein b'Shabbos. Now, he cooked on Yontif thinking he's going to need it, and he ended up not eating it. Not needing it. He's allowed to use it even b'chol. Kal v'chomer b'Shabbos. Ubilvad shelo yarid. Meaning, it's got to be serious. V'im herim osur. All right? V'afilu b'Shabbos shachar Yom Tov. In other words, he is cooking on Yontif, and he's being marim that he doesn't really need it, but he's saying maybe I'll need it. And then he wants to eat it on Shabbos. So it's a little less chamur to do it from Yom Tov to Shabbos is not as chamur as doing it from Yom Tov to Chol. But we're going to say that even if you're marim from Yom Tov to Shabbos, it's also asur. Why? In other words, if he did it b'mezid, we're going to allow it because the assumption is it's not going to happen again. But once you allow marim without an Eruv Tavshilin, you're basically going to destroy the whole concept of Eruv Tavshilin because everybody is just going to cook based on marim. Remember that. Because of Rabbi Magid, because of Cain, where did the Rambam get that from? Miriam Rinin Gabi Yom Tov Shechal Lios be'erev Shabbos v'nechal eruvo kodem afiyu ubishul. So he made an eruv on Thursday, and Friday is Yom Tov, and before he started cooking for Shabbos or Yom Tov, the eruv got eaten up. Mevashel hu liyom tov v'im hotir l'Shabbos ubelvat shel yarim. So if the eruv got eaten up, you can still cook on Yom Tov extra. And if it's left over, as long as you're not being married. The imherim asur, the amravashi. So why are you more machmir if he was marim than if he did it b'mezid? The tfei chmiru mi marim mi b'mezid v'loven v'sham the kosher came b'marim tzarchol the asur. V'chein kosav b'farshim adkan l'kshono v'chein kosav harivash. And again, the reason being that if you we're worried that if we allow marim is something that the person can do very easily. Doesn't feel bad about being marim, and therefore that could ultimately lead to a completely eradication of Eruv Tavshilin. Mazid, we're not worried he's going to do it b'mezid again. Okay, now it gets a drop complicated. V'zelo shen Rashba she'ela Tavshil shenizbashel biyom tov rishon litzorech yom tov sheni. Till now we've been talking about he cooked on Yom Tov and he wants to use it on Shabbos or Chol. What about Yom Tov? He cooked it on Yom Tov Rishon, and he wants to know, can I use it on Yom Tov Sheni? Teshuva. Zubaya the Gemara. He understands that this is exactly what the Gemara is asking when it says Avar ve'ofa my. Meaning Avar ve'ofa means you cooked when you weren't supposed to. So just like you're not supposed to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos without an Eruv, and you're not allowed for sure to cook from Yom Tov to Chol, you're also not allowed to cook from Yom Tov A to Yom Tov B. So what is the din of Avar ve'ofa v'mai? Right, my. That was the Gemara that wanted to say that a person who is whoa, just a second, sorry, lost my book. That was the Gemara there that wanted to say that a person who was the Gemara asked the Shaila of Iboiluhu Ovar ve'ofa mai, and the Gemara tried to bring a couple of rayas. And then it wanted to bring another raya from Mishi Niach. I'll just read it to you again. We saw it inside. Mishi Niach Eruv Tavshilin Hareza Ofel Mavashelu Matmin. Dimrotza Lechol et Eruvo. What if he wants to eat up the Eruv? Harashus Biyodo. Ochlo Adshelo Ofa. What happens if he ate the Eruv before he baked? Then Hareza Lo Yofa, Velo Yavashel, Velo Yachmin, Lo Lo Velo Yacherim, Velo Acherim Ofel Mavashim Lo. Aval Mavashel Hu Liyom Tovim Hotir, L'Shabbos, Ubilvat Shelo Yarim. V'imherim asur, and then the Gemara says that's no raya to mezid because we're more machmir on marim than we are on mezid. So the Gemara wanted to bring a raya, and the Gemara was doche. So it sounds like that's what the Rashba is saying, that baya the Gemara over the ofa mai v'asina lemifshat midetanya mishiniach erev tavshilin, and it got eaten up. That he's not, that he can't cook, and if he's marim it's asur, but if he leaves over it's mutter. The Dachi Rav Nachman Harif lo posak baklal. The Rif didn't mention it, so therefore miu mistaver the shari. Therefore, the Rashba wants to say that I think that it's mutter to use it if he did it b'mezid dafka. Chadami the Dachu lo Rav Nachman v'Rav Ashi that they didn't accept the raya from there that it's aser. Shmami nahachi spirale v'od dahavile mishal divreihem. It's only a derabana because imi deraisa mishri shari. If you're only worried about the Isra D'Oraisa, you solve the Isra D'Oraisa with Ho'il. So it's only an Isra D'Rabbanan because we don't want you to do it since you didn't do an Eruv. And therefore it's only D'Rabbanan, and we're going to be Mekil if you did it from Yom Tov Rishon to Yom Tov Sheni. V'chein nir midivrei Rambam. Afal pisha lo kosav came before. I'll just read you the Rambam that he's building this on. All right, we saw it again. You don't have to open your Rambam. I'll just read you the Rambam that we're building this on. All right, the Rambam is a Perek Vav, Halach. Where is it? what am I looking for here? Perek Vav Halacha Yud. So the Rambam writes like this, and this is what he's building it on. Mishalo hiniach Eruv Tavshilin. So he didn't make an Eruv. Ubishel ve'ofa. That sounds like Mezid. Lechol biyom the hotir. I'm sorry, not the he. No, I was sorry. He didn't do an Eruv, and he cooked for Yontif. Okay, the hotir, and it got left over. Oh, shazimin orchim below bo. He cooked thinking he's going to have guests, and they never showed up. Now, what are you allowed to do with the extra? Hareza ochel hamoter lemochar. Vim herim hareza osur laochlo. So it sounds like the only problem is that if he's marim, he's not allowed to eat it. Avar ve'ofal ubishel l'shabbos ein osrin olav. If he did it intentionally, we're not going to asur it. Why? La michmiru v'osur ala marim v'lo osur ala mezid. Shim tatir lemarim. He's giving the reason why we're more machmir. Shim tatir lemarim nimtzu kol hamarimim. Everybody's going to be marim. V'yishtakeh shem eruv tavshilin. Aval hamezid eino matzui. V'im avar hayom lo yavar pamachefs. And therefore, that's where he gets it from. The idea is that if you were ofe intentionally from Yom Tov Rishon to Yom Tov Sheni, b'diavad, we're going to let you use it. Okay? All right. V'chein pasuk bala itur, etc. Okay, we're gonna, and then he goes on in the next section that it's always going to be mutter, always going to be mutter. Even if he had other food that he could have used, we're still going to let him use it. He brings that rise from the Gemara. We did the sugya. We're not going to go into that right now. That's enough. So now we're going to jump to Taf Kuf Chaf Zayin, which is really the halachas of Eruv Tavshilin. And this is where we're going to see all the halachas of Eruv Tavshilin. And then we're going to go into the Mishnah Brura, because this is halacha l'maisa. Here we're getting into halacha l'maisa. So Taf Kuf Chav Zayin. Okay, everybody with me? Yom Tov Shachal Lios Be'erev Shabbos. Lo Yivashal B'tchila L'tzorech Shabbos B'kedera Bifnei Atzma. So you can't put up a pot of food on Yom Tov where the purpose of cooking that food is for Shabbos. Di'ilu b'kedera achas yochel levashal b'ashkamish yirtzeh. That's you can't put up a special pot for Shabbos, but if you're cooking for Yom Tov, you can add as much as you want, even more than you need for Yom Tov, even though your specific intention is for Shabbos. Aval mavashal hu liyom tov, v'im hotir l'Shabbos. And whatever's left over, you're certainly allowed to use for Shabbos. V'al yudei eruv mavashal l'kachila l'zor Shabbos. With an Eruv Tavshilin, then you're going to be able to do it even l'katchila. Let's just read one more halacha, and then we'll do the Beis Yosef. The Eruv zeh pirish. What's the lashon of Eruv? Pirish Rabbeinu Tam shetzarach la'asoso mipas. I'm sorry. Now we're not yet in the meaning. We're talking about l'maisa, what you have to do. The Eruv zeh pirish Rabbeinu Tam shetzarach la'asoso mipat umimine tavshil. You need both. Pat le'efos alav. You need the pot so that you'll be able to bake. The tavshil vashil alav, and you have to start. So you have to start your baking so you can continue baking, and you have to start your cooking so you can continue cooking. V'ri pirish desagi b'tavshil levad. V'Rav Shimshon hazaken pasav v'Rabbeinu Tam v'chein bahag v'chein noagu. Again, so there is a sheet that a tavshil alone is enough. We saw that in the Gemara and the Rishonim, but the minhag certainly most of the poskim hold that you have to do both, and that's certainly our minhag today, is to do both. Okay, let's see some Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef is not going to give us too much new stuff, but it'll be a good review. Okay, so the Beis Yosef starts with Aleph. Okay, Yom Tov Shachal Lios Be'erev Shabbos Lo Yivashal B'tchila Tzorech Shabbos. Mishnah Bereish Perek Beis the Beitza. All right, we saw the Mishnah. Upirish Rashi Lo Yivashal B'tchila Lio Techilas Bishulo V'ikro L'Shem Shabbos. Elo L'Shem Yom Tov Yehei Tchilas Bishulo. You have to cook with intention for Yom Tov. But you're not allowed, one of the things he's alluding to is you're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov and say, well, I need this for Shabbos, but I'll eat a little bit on Yom Tov. That's not good enough. It's got to really be, what the leftover can be used if it was left over from a real Yom Tov cooking. Is Bar B'Simen Tafkuf Gimel. We saw that inside, back. These Bar Od B'Simen Zeh, more about putting it all in one pot at once, all right, as opposed to adding to the existing pot, as opposed to making a separate pot. Okay. Umasha kosav al vashel liyom tovim hotir l'Shabbos. Sham b'Mishnah was explicit. V'hainu lomar diyochel levashel kama kederos litzorach yom tov. Meaning, if you're cooking a pot for Yom Tov and you add extra meat, that's for sure permitted because we say it improves the taste of the meat. What about multiple pots for Yom Tov? But Yochel Levashel Kama Kederos L'Tzorach Yom Tov, V'im Hotir L'Shabbos, U'Pirush Rashi below Harama. Meaning, you can cook multiple pots for Yom Tov, but you have to really think you're going to need them. You can't say, well, maybe, and eat a little bit. That you can't do. Even though we did see that Haramach might work before you ate your meal if you eat from each of the pots. Because then Lamaisa, you made each pot for Yom Tov. But that's only before your meal. Okay, continues the Beis Yosef. Mishnah. Here's going to explain now. Ose Tavshil me'erev Yom Tov, v'somech alav l'Shabbos, u'pirish Rashi, Ose Tavshil l'shem Eruv, v'shailin b'gemor my timer. And we end up with two explanations. So the reason why we're doing it is for covered Shabbos, because without the Eruv, you may just ignore Shabbos. So we want you to prepare something on Thursday so that you'll be thinking about Su'uda Shabbos. And Rav Ashi Amar Kadesh Yomru Ein Ofin Miyom Tov L'Shabbos Kal V'chomer Miyom Tov L'Chol. That it's in order to protect the Yom Tov. So Rava holds it's to protect Shabbos, and Rav Ashi holds it's to protect Yom Tov. You hopefully remember this. We saw this inside. It's a good review. Beis Yosef is always a great review after you did the Gemaras. Upirish Rashi, my taima, lama tiknu er, kadeshi yivror, mitoch shema'arev. You're now on Thursday sitting there and preparing food for Shabbos. Zocher es HaShabbos. Ve'enu machales hakol liyom tov. Meaning you're going to prepare a good portion for Shabbos because you're thinking about it on Thursday, and that reminds you not to finish all the good stuff for Yom Tov. Rav Ashi Omer lo lechaved Shabbos tiknu and lo lechaved Yom Tov kidei sheyomru ein ofin miyom tov l'Shabbos. We want to protect Yom Tov that you don't think you can cook from Yom Tov to Chol. Ela im kein hitchil mi ba'od yom de'eno ela kigomer v'holech aval etchule lo. How do you remember? Because since I can't start on Yom Tov for Shabbos, I have to start on Chol. So therefore, I'll remember Kal V'chomer de Yom Tov l'Chol legamrei lo. That since you're not really letting me cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos unless I start on Chol, for sure you're not going to let me cook from Yom Tov to Chol. V'Rambam Kosav Yom Tov shechal lios erev Shabbos ein ofen u'mevashlim b'Yom Tov mashu ochel amachar b'Shabbos. The Isser zemi divrei sofrim. So you see that it's only a derabanan. Again, because the whole idea is to remind you not to cook from Yom Tov to Chol. Technically, you would be allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. The Tavshil shesomech alav hu anikra Eruv Tavshilin. The Kosva goes, Al Masha Kosav Isuzemi Divrei Sofrit to Rabbanan, meaning Midoraisa you would have been allowed to cook from Shabbos to Yom Tov. Aval Tosos, V'chol Haravosenu Mitzorfas Pershu Dehachana L'Rabba Asur Min HaTorah. Rabba holds it's also Midoraisa because you need Hachana B'chol, and therefore the Shabbos Su'uda needs Hachana B'chol. And if you cooked on Yom Tov for Shabbos, it's lacking hachana b'chol, and therefore afilu miyom tov l'Shabbos kigon hecha she'eno yochel lehenos mimena b'Yom Tov kigon samach l'chashecha d'leka l'meimer hoil. So again, midoraisa, you are not allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos because Shabbos will be missing hachana if you did that. However, there's a concept of hoil that Rabbah holds. Hoil v'kloi orchim, that I'm allowed to do a hoil and therefore I can cook on Yom Tov, since if your orchim came, I would need it for Yom Tov. But therefore, because of that, somuch lechashecha deleka l'meimer hoil u'mikloi le orchim chazi lahu, right? Then you cannot do it right very close to Shkia. Ol inyan kinyan shvita shu tzorich machar. Vafilu hachi moel eruv tavshilin. So even though mideoraisa, you're not allowed to do it unless you have a hoil, all right? But eruv tavshilin it helps. The rabba letamei de isle hoil, the hada omar ravashi kadeshi yomru, al tama eruv ka omar shelekach nitkan kadeshi yomru. Meaning, we don't want you to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos, even though you are allowed to. We don't want you to cook from Yom Tov to Chol, even though you are allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos with a hoil. So therefore, the reason why we demand Eruv Tavshilin anyway is simply to make sure that you don't cook from Yom Tov to Chol. That's why we do an Eruv. Again, machlokas whether it's mutter mi Yom Tov to Shabbos midoraisa, and we just need it as a prophylactic for not cooking from Yom Tov l'chol, right? Or whether no, it's really not allowed to cook. All right, that you need to protect the Shabbos, but everybody both of them seem to agree that there's no issue d'oraisa here, and you got to figure out how there's no issue d'oraisa. Josh, you had a question. Look, you had a question. No, okay. Because of Atos's Reish Beitza, Tema. Here's what we didn't see this inside, but we need to see it. Hoil v'hachana midioraisa. Rabba holds that that you have to have a chana b'chol midioraisa to allow you to eat food on Shabbos. And if you cooked on Yom Tov, you're lacking hachana b'chol. So ich ofen mevashel mi Yom Tov l'Shabbos. V'chitem al yidei Eruv Tavshilin. V'chiasi takanta de rabbanon uvok v'oker hachana deoraisa. So you have to have hachana deoraisa in order to eat the food on Shabbos. And if you cook it on Yom Tov, it lacks hachana b'chol. And how does Eruv fix that problem? The Nir Yashiv de Rabba Gufei. Rabba is the one who says the Islay Hoil. The Afilu L'didan Nicha. The Choldover. I'm sorry, let's stop there. So the Hoil solves the deoraisa problem. Okay, and Memela, you're when you're cooking on Yom Tov, you're really cooking for Yom Tov, and what's left over is not a problem, and the Eruv solves the derabana. He wants to say that you can't be missing hachana, okay, if it's cooked and baked. That whole discussion is by a beitza shenolda. And the Rabbah only holds the problem of hachana with something new. But if something was already cooked, you can't say that it lacks hachana. That's not a lack of hachana. That's how Tosfos explains it in the beginning of Beitza. Uve emes. I'm continuing in the Beis Yosef. Uve emes. That's how Rabbah. Question?
Yes, so we would understand from this that according to Rava holds it's deoraisa aser, hoel gets you into a derabanan, and then the Eruv Tavshilin makes it mutter. And according to the Rambam, which holds the derabanan, the Eruv Tavshilin just works without hoel. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, so Tosfos says even sharper. Tosfos wants to say that in cooked food there's no problem of hachana, that the hachana of Rabbah isn't violated when you have cooked food. Okay. All right, and then the question is whether you're allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos, okay? And since there's a hoil, there's no prohibition of cooking on Yom Tov because you're cooking for Yom Tov, except the Rabbanan legislated in order to make it clear that they don't want you to do that, and therefore they made Eruv Tavshilin. But according to this, it's going to be very important halacha l'maisa. Since part of the Eruv Tavshilin works through hoil, you can't start your Shabbos cooking a half hour before Shabbos. No, on Yom Tov, Shavuos is going to be Yom Tov, and your wife wants to have cholent. Okay, so no problem. I'll put up the cholent a half hour before Shabbos because it's going to cook on the plateau all of Shabbos. That's not going to work. In other words, you have to start your preparation, your cooking preparations, early enough so that if guests would come, you'd have food to feed them.
And according to the Rambam, it's only Asur Derabanan, and the Eruv Tavshilin just takes care of that.
That's according to everybody. That's how we paskin. Just one second. According to everybody, that's how we paskin. Okay.
Right, but according to the Rambam, who holds it's Durabanan, you wouldn't need that extra step of Hoel because you're already at a
No,
Durabanan
it's
level.
only Durabanan because of Hoel.
It's only
Without Hoel, there's no Raisa.
Okay.
Okay. Let's read it again. Uve'emes das Harambam mevur b'Gemara perak elu ovrin. Did we get that? Yeah. Okay. Uve'emes das Harambam mevur b'Gemara perak elu ovrin. The Amrin and Hossam. This was what we saw in Psachim about Hoel. Mido Raisa tzorche Shabbos nasin b'Yom Tov. You are allowed to prepare because it's kedusha achas. You're allowed to make preparations for Shabbos on Yom Tov. That's step 2. So you're allowed to. There's no prohibition of Yom Tov to Shabbos. But the Rabbanan said we're worried because if we let you do Yom Tov to Shabbos, you'll come to do Yom Tov to Chol. The kivin datzrachu Rabbanan Eruv Tavshilin islay hakera. The avagav de laman de lesle hoil amrinan hasam hachi mashma. That we only say that according to the Mandi Amar who doesn't hold of Hoel. There's a machlokas in Psachim, if you remember, whether we have this concept called Hoel. Hoel, that it could be, therefore it's as if it is. Hachi mashra, the Mandi Isle Hoel, Nami Savar Hachi, de Beholo Pligi. That everybody, even if you hold Hoel, you still need the Eruv, so that you won't come to cook from Yom Tov to Chol. V'atosis Storach Lomar, Shesorim Afal Pi She'eno Mefurish B'Gemora. Shecholkim bekach, kol mokom lerava lo shiny le be miyom tov l'Shabbos le miyom tov l'chol. Meaning that the Hoel would work if you're cooking on Yom Tov and the next day is Chol. Technically, if you had a Hoel, you wouldn't be violating Yom Tov. You could cook on Yom Tov l'chol with a Hoel, according to Rava. That's what it turns out from the Gemara. However, we're still going to demand, so when you're cooking from Yom Tov to Shabbos, we're demanding the Eruv so that when you cook from Yom Tov to, again, let's go step by step. You are allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. You are not allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Chol. Hoel allows both. Hoel allows both. The problem is that if I allow you just stam to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos with the Hoel, you may come to cook from Yom Tov to Chol. Okay, and we don't want that. So therefore, we require the Eruv to remind you not to cook from Yom Tov to Chol. Even though, according to Rabbah, there may not be an Issur D'Oraisa because of the Hoel. Okay. Because of a Rambam. Again, this was the Rambam we saw. Here we saw this Rambam about why we call it, what's the use of the word Eruv. Lama nikra shmo Eruv, shekashem shea Eruv osim d'chatzeros u'mevuos me'arev Me'erev Shabbos mishum heker kedesh lo yale al daitem shemuter lahotzi rishus l'rishus b'Shabbos. Remember, midoraisa, you're allowed to go from rishus hayachid to rishus hayachid. The rabbis answered it, and they said, so, but we'll allow you to make what's called eruv, meaning combine, la'arev, mix together all the rishus hayachids, and therefore you're going into all one big rishus. So really, the only point is that I'm doing things on Erev Shabbos or Erev Yom Tov as a reminder because of a rabbinic legislation. Again, in both cases, we start off, midoraisa, something's mutter. The rabbis came and they made it usher. And then the rabbis gave you the fix how to make it work, even within their system. And in Chatzeros, they called it, the mechanism was Eruv Chatzeros. We're going to combine it. So we borrow the phrase Eruv here for Eruv Tavshilin. We're mixing, even though it's not a real Eruv. It's not really mixing. So really, Eruv Tavshilin as a reminder. The concept of Eruv Tavshilin is to remind you about how to cook properly on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Okay, because of a Rava Magid, I believe we saw that Magid Mishnah inside. Kvar nisbar beperak aleph mehilchos Eruvim, lama niskar beheker hachatzeros Eruv, umidati shu sover, shal ze gam ken amruv Eruv et trumin, ve'ikar milas Eruv b'devarim, elu ena betchilas hanachasa el gabe chatzeros, v'hushala letchumin uletavshilin. Meaning, the real use of the word Eruv, like we just said, the real use of the word Eruv is only for Erev Tchum, only Erev Chatzeros. It doesn't have any shaykhs to Erev Tchumin or any shaykhs to Eruv Tavshilin. The word Eruv is really meaningless in that context. Lefi sha'af hein nasin ba'ochel. But since they're done in a similar way, we call it the same thing. It's not a borrowed phrase. It's real. We're doing an Eruv. We're combining. We're mixing together. Just like an Eruv Chatzeros, we mix together Chatzeros. Here we're mixing together cooked food from Erev Yom Tov for Shabbos with the food that we cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. So it's a real Eruv we're mixing together. La Sosan Yacha. Again, that's beyond what we want to talk about. Okay, good. All right. Now, Eruv Zepir Rabbeinu Tam. What do you need for the Eruv? And here we get the machlokas. Do you need tavshil and pot or just tavshil? So Eruv Zepir Rabbeinu Tam. Tzarich lasoso mipat umimini tavshil. Sham b'Mishnah. Osa tavshil me'erev Yom Tov v'somech alav l'Shabbos. Beishamai omrim shnei tavshilin. Beis Hillel omrim tavshil echad. Kosav Arosh. Rabbeinu Tam haya omer. De plukta de Beishamai u'Beis Hillel hu bebishul. We're only talking about how much you need to prepare to be allowed to cook. De Beishamai savar de levashel. Sagi b'tavshil echad. So what about baking? Aval le'efos. Af Beis Hillel modu de bu'in and pas. The chulu islu de Rebbe Eliezer. The omerein ofin ella al ha'ofui. Meaning you certainly need some kind of an eruv to be able to bake. And they're only talking about cooking, whether you need one tavshil or two tavshil. The Hada Omar Abaye lo shonu ela tavshil aval pat lo. L'tzorech bishul ka'omar, meaning I don't need to do an eruv on pot in order to cook. So what it comes out is if you would do an eruv on a pot without an eruv on a tavshil, you wouldn't be allowed to cook. You'd only be allowed to bake. V'chol milid b'chlal bishul dichsiv v'yavashlu ha'pesach v'chein lehecham chamin k'di'isa v'perakira gabe mayim ha'poshrim v'zeu bishulo. In other words, bishul includes everything except baking. The pot v'shleikus havishtei gezeros. U'mikomakom hotzoah v'hadlaka sharian. Remember, we're going to be allowed to carry and cook with our eruv. Afagav delo havu b'chlal pas v'tavshil. Here's the problem. All right, we said that you're going to be allowed to carry, if you need to carry your sitter on Yom Tov to have it in Shul for Shabbos, are you allowed to do that? So with an Eruv, you're allowed to do that, even though it's not Tavshil and it's not Pas. Mikol makom hotzah v'hadlaka sharian afal gav delau havi b'chlal pat v'tavshil delo atzuchu rabbanan ela be'ikar tikun ha'su'uda. And once you've done what's necessary for su'uda, so then all of the malachos that you are allowed to do on Yom Tov, you can also do those malachos for Shabbos. Okay, well, let's stop here for a minute. One of the questions that came up, it's brought halacha, it's mentioned halacha l'maisa. It's a bit of a machlokas. When we get to the Shulchan Aruch Mishnah Berurah, we're going to see it. Is the gabbai of the shul allowed to roll the Sefer Torah on Shavuos afternoon for the Kriyas Torah for Shabbos? You know for sure the gabbai on Yom Tov is not allowed to roll the Sefer Torah if Yom Tov comes out on a Wednesday. Okay, so we finished our Kriyas Torah on Wednesday, and now we want to have the Torah rolled for tomorrow for Thursday's weekly Kriya. You're definitely not allowed to do that. That's hachana from Yom Tov to Chol. Okay, so I'm rolling the Torah on Yom Tov for Shabbos. So that's l'chayra hachana from Yom Tov to Shabbos, and it's not bishul and it's not afiyah. Everybody hear the issue? So it's a bit of a question whether that's included in the eruv, whether the Eruv Tavshilin works for that. L'maisa we paskin that it does, but there are those that want to say it doesn't. So that's what's being alluded to here. You're certainly allowed to carry, because since carrying is, see, the problem with rolling Sefer Torah is there's no malacha there, it's just tircha. So it's tircha. Okay, to roll the Sefer Torah, and maybe that's not included in the Eruv. The Eruv is including malacha. So therefore, since carrying is a mutter malacha on Yom Tov because of mitoch shehutra litzorech hutra nami shelo litzorech of ochel nefesh, but it has to be tzorech tzas. So therefore, the Eruv would cover the carrying for Shabbos. Everybody hear the equation here. Okay, maybe this is a good opportunity to answer one of the questions that was sent on the chat by one of our one of our participants who isn't able to participate live. Let me call it up again. Here it is. So once we say mitoch, all right, so what do we say? We say mitoch allows you to cook on Yontif for Shabbos. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. We say mitoch shehutra litzorech, hutra nami shelo litzorech. Just like since you're allowed to light a fire litzorech ochel nefesh, you're allowed to do it shelo litzorech ochel nefesh as long as it's litzorech ksas. All right, you're allowed to carry ochel nefesh if you need to get your pot from one place to another to eat your meal. You're allowed to carry it. So we say mitoch shehutra litzorech, hutra nami shelo litzorech. Everybody, we talked about this. So there's a powerful question here. If I say mitoch, so that allows me to cook, to do a malacha that I don't really need for ochel nefesh, because since I allow a malacha la-ochel nefesh, I will also allow a malacha not for ochel nefesh, as long as it's... So why don't I say hoil, right, and should allow me to cook on Yontif without Eruv Tavshilin, cook on Yontif for the next day, for Shabbos. Because the mitoch shehutra litzorech, hutra nami shelo litzorech. Let me read the question. Again, you guys following the question? Once we say mitoch, why isn't there at least a possibility that cooking should be completely permitted, even if I don't need it for Yontif? Are you guys following? I say mitoch shehutra litzorech, hutra nami shelo litzorech. So why can't I cook as much as I want on Yontif for tomorrow?
Because we're now understanding mitoch to be lo litzorech, meaning not tzorech Yontif at all for tomorrow, as opposed to the way we understand it is you could carry your stroller same way you could carry food. Is that?
So why can't I cook? What the concept of mitoch shehutra litzorech, hutra nami lo litzorech. This is a question asked by the Rishonim. Mitoch shehutra litzorech, hutra nami shelo litzorech. So am I allowed to cook on Yontif?
For that day, we could cook for Yontif.
Mitoch shehutra to cook on Yontif, litzorech. I should be allowed to cook on Yontif shelo litzorech, i.e. for tomorrow. Josh, you're on the right track. You're on the right track. What do you want to say, Josh?
I think it was a Tosfos we saw. I might be wrong. That I think he used a language that's tzorech sas. That there had to be at least some sort of a need for this day, not for another day.
Oh, that's the point. The mitoch requires need for this day. Okay, and when I cook a lot for tomorrow, there's no need for today. That's exactly it. We saw that. I forgot where we saw that. We saw that in Tosfos in Perek Aleph, right?
I don't remember where.
Yeah, well, okay. It is brought down. It was a good question that was asked. And the answer is that mitoch allows me to do other things that I need for today. Mitoch that I'm allowed to do cooking for today, I'm allowed to do other similar things, even though not for cooking, for today. But it doesn't allow me to do it for tomorrow. Okay. All right. Let me just see if there were. Oh, okay. Another good question. If cooking on Yom Tov is inherently okay for Shabbos, meaning midoraisa, we let you cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Okay? So he wants to know, Yom Tov is on Thursday. Follow this question. Yom Tov is on Thursday. Friday is not Yom Tov. You guys had that on Pesach, the last 2 days of Pesach in Chutz La'aretz, right? Now both of you guys are in Chutz La'aretz. So you had this. Can you cook? So midoraisa. In midoraisa, when on the first days of when doraisa, when Yontif came out on Thursday, Friday, midoraisa, you were allowed to cook on Friday for Shabbos, correct? That's what we're deciding. All right. So why can't I cook on Thursday when Friday is not Yontif for Shabbos. I'm cooking on Thursday for Shabbos. I'll read you the question again.
Because of Hoel or because of Eruv Tavshilin?
No Eruv Tavshilin. There's no Eruv Tavshilin here. Midoraisa. So we're in a Midoraisa system right now. Okay? If cooking on Yom Tov is inherently okay for Shabbos, because we're saying Midoraisa, you're allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. It's just we make all kinds of gzeros. We're worried you won't pay attention, or you might think it's okay to cook from Yom Tov l'chol, but fundamentally it's okay to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So therefore he's asking, why can't we cook on a Thursday Yom Tov for Shabbos, even if the Friday intervening isn't Yom Tov? Everybody hear the question? I mean, you got to know. This is the kind of a question. There's got to be an answer. There's got to be an answer to this one.
I mean, it seems to me that that's not really preparation for Shabbos. That's alleviating what you would do on Chol.
No, absolutely. I am cooking on Yom Tov, and I'm saying this pot is being cooked on Yom Tov for Shabbos.
Right. But if not for that, I would be doing that on Friday.
And therefore,
I'm not really I'm not really preparing for Shabbos. I'm lightening my workload on Friday.
Okay. That's a
You're preparing for Chol. Like Josh, you're preparing for Chol.
That's a balabatisha answer. You're basically, that's what Stewie's also saying, is that you're really preparing for Chol, but so you don't have to cook on Chol. Okay, but there's a much more powerful answer. Why are you allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos?
Hoel.
Midoraisa. According to the Shita that says you're allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Kedusha achas. That was part of the machlokas. Is Yom Tov and Shabbos Kedusha achas? If it's Kedusha achas, you're allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. That's one of the opinions. So you can't possibly say that on Thursday I can cook for Shabbos with a chol in the middle. There's no Kedusha achas. I'm ending up cooking for Yom Tov, and I'm not going to use it on Yom Tov Shabbos because it's now available to me. This is what you already more similar to what you guys said. It's now available to me for chol. That's exactly cooking for Yom Tov to chol. Okay. It's kedusha achas. You need kedusha achas to go from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Your default is you can't cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos because Yom Tov can only be for itself. But if it's kedusha achas, I can cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. The minute kedusha achas falls apart, of course you can't do it. That's the simple answer. Okay, let me just see if the third question we want to answer it already or not. Okay, this is it's a Hoel question. We'll read it. You know what? No, let's wait till we get to Hoel in the Shulchan Aruch. In the tour. Okay. All right, so where are we up to? I lost my place. Where did we get up to?
We had Otanya?
We call Makam Hotzova Hadlaka, Sharian, Afagav the Lav Have Beklal Pasta Tavshil. The Rabbanan Ela Be'ikr Tikun Hasuda, and the Eruv Tavshilin is for the Ikr Tikun Hasuda. Once we did that, everything now from Yom Tov, everything that's mutter on Yom Tov, can be also done for Shabbos. Verio Mermasha Medaktik Rabbeinu Tami Pat Vishlokos De'ein Afia Bechlal Bishul Ein Araya Elafilo Have Bechlal Hotziua Bechlal Afish Ein. Okay. We don't. That's a question about machlokas about where does afia fall in? Okay. Yeah. V'hada darshina. Let's skip a couple of lines. V'hada darshinan et asher tofu efu. That I can bake something that is already baked, and that was the drasha. That asher tofu efu means I'm allowed to bake on Yom Tov something that was already baked. So that means I have to bake it before Yom Tov. So, lav divrei hakolhu. The Tanya b'tosefta ha'osa tavshil me'erev Yom Tov ofe u'mevashel olav l'Shabbos u'matmin olav esachamin. Okay, and it's v'od Tanya hasam rashayim b'nei mavui lasos tavshil v'lev zuzal olav v'hedya pligi. Okay, we don't need this. We'll leave this part. Okay. Okay, V'haran sosar divrei Rabbeinu tam v'hela de'ein tzorich pat v'shekein das harivzal v'chein nirashu das haramba. Meaning, This is a big machlokas. Do I have my full Eruv Tavshilin if all I use is a tavshil without pas? Okay, so there are Rishonim who hold that's all I need. V'chein nira shudas harambam beperek vav da Mordechai kosav kedas Rabbeinu Tam dibainan pat v'tavshil. Let's read the Rambam and see what it sounds like from the Rambam. We saw it again. You don't need to open your Rambam. I will read it to you. It's perek vav halacha gimel. Let me just get it open again. Okay, so the Rambam. You tell me what you think the Rambam holds from this lashon. Again, the issue is whether you need pot and tavshil and pot, or just tavshil to be able to bake. Says the Rambam, Eruv Tavshilin shiuru ein pachas mikazayis bein lechad bein la'alafim. Vein osin eruv zeh lo bepat velo berifas uchiyotze ben ela betavshil shu parperet kigon bosav edagim uvetzet uchiyotze behen. V'afilu adoshim shebshulei akera v'afilu shamnunis shalasakil, etc., etc. So what does it sound like according to the Rambam?
Sounds like anything.
Listen again. No, you got to know what the question is. The question is, do I need tavshil and pot to be able to bake? Do I need to be able to cook with the tavshil and bake with the pot? Or I can do everything, both cooking and baking, all based on tavshil? I'll read it again. Eruv Tavshilin shiuru ein pachos mikazayis bein lechad bein la'alafim. Ve'ein osin eruv zeh lo bepat velo berifus uchayotze ben ela betavshil shu parperet kigon bosav edagim uvetzim uchayotze ben. Meaning, what the Rambam did say is you cannot make an eruv tavshilin for cooking and baking if all you had was pot. The question is tavshil? So pot is not sufficient for eruv. The question is it necessary? Tavshil is necessary. Is tavshil sufficient, or you still will need pot? It sounds like from the Rambam that all you need is tavshil. That he's telling you pot won't work for tavshil, but tavshil will work for pot. That's what it sounds like from the Rambam, and there are Rishonim who say that. And that's what it means. That's what he means here. Let's go back and say it.
L'chadchila, you could only use one, according to the Rambam. That's
the Eruv Tavshilin. There's not like a chila b'diavad here in the Rambam. What's the definition of Eruv Tavshilin? Tavshil and pot, or just Tavshil? Let's see the Ran again. Let's see inside. Varan sosar divrei Rabbeinu Tam v'hela de'ein tzorech pot v'shekain das harif v'chein nira shu das haramba. Perek vav halacha gimel. Now, okay, so again, it's machlokas rishonim. Mordechai kosav kedas Rabbeinu Tam diba inan pat v'tavshil. V'hatosvos kosvu sheri cholek al Rabbeinu Tam. Umikol makom omeri lo mila'ani libi lavor al divrei dodi, my uncle. V'tzorech pat v'tavshil. Meaning, his opinion was he only needs tavshil. But you know, Rabbeinu Tam, his uncle, said you need both. I don't think you need both, but I'm going to make sure that I use both. V'chein imadavar ad kan l'shona. Okay, so he held you only need tavshil, but he said lamaisa I'm going to make sure we do pot also. V'Rav Magid kosav perek vav da shebetavshil echad below pat sagi. That's based on the Rambam. V'chein nira min halachos v'chein kosav miktzas hagaonim v'zed das haramban v'harashba. Okay, v'zeh l'shonam uchedivrei Rabbeinu ela shenohagu lahachmir lahatzrich pat v'tavshil lahotzi midei kol safek ad kan l'shono. So it seems like most of the Rishonim hold that tavshil alone is enough, but you know what? Since there are Rishonim that say you also need pot, let's do both.
So the Lamai said someone would at least b'diavad could be yotzi with tavshil, seemingly.
It sounds like that, of course, yes, because they're most Rishonim hold. We hold, and since we're basically dealing here with an Isser D'Rabbanan, because we're going to have to, because we're relying on Hoil, and you got to cook early anyway, so it's only a D'Rabbanan. So therefore, yes, somebody who only did Tavshil. We will see. I think we'll see in the Shulchan Aruch Halacha L'Maisa that yes, you can rely on Tavshil alone. Okay, v'kosvu hagos Maimon sheri v'rabo shel Rashi hayu noagim la'arei bepat v'Tavshil. V'chein poshat haminhag. Umihu, this is what you asked to. Hecha de'ira de lo ira of ela b'tavshil levad, somchin al kol hanach rabuvusa d'sharu. So that's halacha l'maisa. We want to do, our minhag is to do tavshil in pot. If somebody only did it with tavshil, b'di'evet, they certainly can cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Okay? Okay, well, we don't need to, we'll skip this Mordechai. Okay, let's go into the Dalit in the, back to the tour. We have 5. Let's go back to the tour. B'tzorech sheyehei tavshil. What is this tavshil? What's the definition of a tavshil? It's a little hard because we don't really know how they used to conduct their meals in those days. So we'll try to get but this is brought in the Gemara all the time. Roi lelafet bo hapat lafuke daisa. Lelafet bo hapat means it's the kind of a thing that you eat with bread. Meat, fish, vegetables. Those are things you eat with bread. Lapuke daisa. Daisa is cream of wheat. Cream of wheat has a din of pot. Okay, and we saw in the Gemara it's a machlokas. Okay, but whether you can use daisa or not, but the simple understanding was that you cannot use daisa. Okay, because we had hani bavloi tipshoi that they used to eat. They did stupid. They ate daisa with bread. Okay, umiu kol mine tavshil sli shalok mevushal roy lekach. Meaning it's got to be something that you eat with bread, but it can be prepared in any way. It can be roasted, it can be cooked, it can be boiled, it can be half raw, as long as it's a way that people eat it. Okay? Let's just read Vav. Ve'afilu adashim shenisharu b'shulei hakadera. The finish here is that you had beans that you cooked for Yontif, and you scraped them out, and at the bottom of the pot there was a little bit of beans left over. So they were not cooked for Shabbos. They were cooked for Yontif, and you left them over. That's also good enough to then designate it for your Eruv for Shabbos. V'shamnunis shenidbak v'sakin goreres somech alav ubilvad. I'm keeping to read ubilvad shebo kizayis shezeu shiuro bein betchiloso bein besofo bein leechad bein leelef. Okay, let's just read one more. V'yesh omrim davka shebishlu ha'adashim me'erev Yom Tov v'chotach b'sakin hashamnunis be'erev Yom Tov tahashta ika hochacha. Aval im nisharu ha'adashim v'hashamnunis mishlosha or arba yamim kodem ein somchin. The nearer the shari b'chol inyan. Here we get into a very important issue. So he's saying that we're talking now where I cooked on Erev Yontif. I cooked my pot of beans for Yontif, and at the bottom of the pot I left over some beans that they got left over. I can designate those, so they weren't cooked for Shabbos. They weren't cooked for Shabbos. They were cooked for Yontif. But I can designate them as my Eruv. What about if I cooked on Monday beans? I cooked Monday beans, and I had leftover beans for Monday. Can I then Erev Yontif designate that for Eruv? I want you to read again. You'll see the lashon why there's a question here. Let's go. Let's read it again. Afilu adashim. Read again for Vav. Afilu adashim. There's a chiddush in the Gemara. Afilu adashim shenishalu b'shulei hakadera v'shamnunis shenidbak v'sakin goro v'somech alav ubilvad shekezai shezel shiuro. The yesh omrim, based on they learned pshat in that Gemara. Dafka shebishlo hadashim me erev Yom Tov v'chatach b'sakin hashamnunis be'erev Yom Tov. All of this has to happen on Thursday for the Friday Yom Tov. The hashta ika hochacha, you cooked it on Thursday, so even though it's left over, it's clear you were doing it for Yom Tov, and it's going to be left over for Shabbos.
If it was on Monday, there would be no hochacha.
Aval im nisharu hadashim hashimnunis mishlosha or arba yamim kodem. On Monday you cooked beans and you left them over. Now you want to use that on Thursday for your Eruv Tavshilin. This shita holds no ein somchi. The nearer the shari b'cholin. The Torah holds that it's okay, and that's going to be a very important thing. And that opens up the door, which we saw in the Rosh, I believe, opens up the door for the possibility that you don't need 2 Eruv Tavshilins when a Sukkot comes out on Thursday, Friday in Chutz Laretz, where it's 2 days Yontif, and then you have a 3-dayer. Okay, we don't have that problem in Sukkot. We never have, but on you might. So you have Thursday, Friday, Sukkot. and then you have Thursday, Friday, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah. Do I need a second Eruv on Wednesday, Erev Shmini Atzeres? Or can I rely on the Eruv that I made on Erev Yom Tov of the first day Sukkot and say that Eruv also works for the last day? We saw that in the Rosh.
Well, practically, we're mafmir like the shita that it doesn't work because there was no halacha.
Now, one of the beauties here is that we don't draw any conclusions till we go through all the sources and we see how the sources lead up to the psak in the Shulchan Aruch and in the Mishnah Berurah. Okay, guys? All right. So we'll pick up the Beis Yosefs that we did on these four. We just ran through about 4 or 5 seifim in the tour. Now we'll go back to the Beis Yosefs on Wednesday. Okay? Say it again more. Good week, everybody.
You too.